After bringing human rights activists to the discussion table, Vladimir Putin met with military chiefs. Russia's president ordered the armed forces to focus first and foremost on a new frontier, the Arctic. For more on this now, we're joined by Edward Struzik, a leading Canadian researcher of the Arctic region. Mr. Struzik, can you explain to our viewers why many people say that global warming is actually speeding up the race to the Arctic by so many countries?
Well, global warming is essentially melting the sea ice very, very quickly and allowing for shipping, a shortcut to Europe and Asian markets through North America to get there much faster than they would through the Panama Canal. Number two, it's also opening up resources that had been almost impossible to get to at this point. And so the future of the world economy to some extent is dependent on the Arctic. And I think, Russia and Canada, the United States and Norway and Denmark are very interested in exploiting these resources.
Now, on Monday, the Canadian foreign minister said that the country intended to lay claim to the North Pole. Who should decide who controls this unique region?
Who decides? Well, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea that makes provision for a dispute mechanism process to resolve this. But, each country has 10 years to make their claim, and then probably it's going to be another 5 to 10 years before the United Nations Convention Committee can make the decision. But the problem with this is that it's a non-binding recommendation. So if, say, Russia doesn't agree with Canada or Canada doesn't agree with Norway or Denmark, they have to resolve this diplomatically. And so this could set off a whole new round of negotiations. In the meantime, all of those resources are going to be exploited. And so perhaps there's not going to be any rules and there's going to be a lot of boundary disputes.
Yeah, speaking of this, you bring up the non-binding recommendations and the tensions it could create. What do you foresee in your experience sort of in this sphere? What do you foresee as far as the types of tensions that a race for these resources could create?
Well, I think, common sense will probably prevail in that, it's not the interest of any of these Arctic countries to go to war over those resources. And I think there is mechanisms at play through the Arctic Council, through a number of different treaty processes for cooperation to get this resolved while the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea makes its decisions. So I think there's a lot of time and there's a lot of room for negotiation, but I think the problem is that, in the meantime, countries can sometimes play to the politics of their nations. I think, in Russia, we're seeing a militarization of the Arctic. In Canada, we're seeing Canada claim the North Pole when, in fact, their scientific committee really didn't include that in the draft that they were going to send to the United Nations Convention. And this was sort of a political decision, and no one really quite understands why it came up at the last minute, other than maybe they're playing politics and appealing to the Canadian public. So this kind of posturing, I think, can be very dangerous. Yeah,
it'll certainly be an interesting thing to watch as we move forward. Thank you so much for joining us, Edward Struzik, scientist and journalist.